ABA is applied behavior analysis. It's a behavioral science that's focused on behavior change and utilizing behavior principles to increase functional skills and facilitate development.
Before the ABA, it's about our compassionate care for the families coming into the services.
What do you think the families are struggling with?
Most parents don't feel like their child is truly has just behavioral issues, or maybe it's they have sensory issues, or maybe they just kind of act out in class a little bit.
Our goal is not to turn a kid away. Our goal is to be the support system for that family.
One of the first things that we talk to parents about is understanding what behavior is.
People will look at ABA services as just a service for autism. I don't believe it to be so.
It is shown that ABA is the most effective treatment for autism.
This episode is for parents and caregivers navigating autism support and ABA therapy. You'll learn why early support matters and how progress happens when families and professionals work together. This is 360 Human Services. Let's get into it.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're joined here with Julie, who is our clinical director for 360 Human Services, and Tyler, who is our intake manager for 360 Human Services. Our goal today is to ensure that we get information out to everyone who's listening. What is 360 Human Services, and what do we stand for, and what are we building? What is ABA services, and how do we get access to care to anyone who's interested in it? And more than anything, if you are someone seeking to make a difference in a child's life, how do you join organizations such as ours, our industry such as ours? So I'd like to start off by introducing Julie. Julie, if you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career in ABA services?
Sure. So, I started in ABA services about 17 years ago. Really didn't think I was going to make a career out of it. And I needed a part-time position. And, as I learned about ABA and what it's about, and I got to work with some really amazing families and clients, and I noticed the impact that I was able to have on the families, and that became very meaningful for me. And so I decided to pursue my board certification to be a behavior analyst. And after that, I worked with supervising clients, working on treatment programs to help them, reduce some challenging behaviors and increase their life skills. And after doing that for some time, I transitioned to working in operations and helping teams really figure out how to effectively and efficiently provide quality services to their clients.
Those who are listening who have never heard the term ABA, can you elaborate what ABA stands for?
ABA is applied behavior analysis, and it's a behavioral science that's focused on, behavior change and utilizing behavior principles to increase, functional skills and facilitate development.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you very much for joining us. And I think it's going to be really, really hopeful. We have some great things to share with everyone. And so, Tyler, what made you join ABA services? And if you can tell us a little bit about your role and experience.
Okay, yeah, I have a similar background as Julie. It's just I came here I won't say not knowing about ABA services, but I just needed a part-time at the time, and I was actually executive assistant of the company. So I was learning ABA as I was learning the role. Later on, I saw in the San Bernardino area that we needed extra staff. And so I took the advantage of needing extra hours and picking up hours as a behavior technician. So I got the full training as our entry-level position as a behavior technician in our clinic. And then I would say for my role, somehow I believe just because my background executive assistant and just being able to be a part of every conversation alongside the CEO, I ended up learning about every department we had. And just through my desire of wanting to just keep working, because I think at the time I was paying for school and I was getting ready to be out on my own. So any ability to pick up hours I took, which ended up me having me help out our past intake manager. And when she had left, since I was already thoroughly trained into the position, I ended up just taking her role and moving out of being the executive assistant. I would still say at the time, I'd still picked up a couple behavior technician roles, just if like one of our techs had an emergency flat tire and the family was already there, I'll just take over the session. So it was good that I already had the training for it. And then I'd say my experience as the intake manager is, in comparison as the executive assistant, I was just behind a computer every day. And so I never spoke to our families too much, and I never really understood what the parents needed, because either I was doing the email side or the spreadsheet side, or as a behavior technician, I was just reading the data sheet or the learning tree for what the child needed. But I was just reading and going, and there was no like human part of it for me. So besides working with the child, but once I became the intake manager, I realized when it comes to parents and it's their very first time receiving ABA or hearing about ABA, it was going to be on me to explain it well, make sure they felt comfortable, make sure they felt safe and understood what our main goal in ABA is, which is before the ABA, it's about our compassionate care for the families coming into the services. So it was just really, I guess I would say like eye-opening, or it just felt good to be able to help them make that big step for their child, especially for the parents where this is their first child with an intellectual disability like autism. And then while being here, it has pushed me into wanting to pursue more into the ABA field. So I'm currently in my master's program to get my BCBA license.
Oh, congratulations. That's pretty good. And just to, piggyback off what you just said, is a lot of times now that you're in an intake manager role, you are the first person that anyone who's looking for services hears from. Most of our clients, from what I understand and what I know, is when they come to our company, it might be their first time receiving ABA. What do you think, from your perspective, the families are feeling? What do you think the families are struggling with? And what do you think the families knew more about when receiving our services and making that first call to you?
Understanding the definition of behavior. And I would like to be able to say not only my training as a behavior technician, but now me going to school has opened my eyes to what the definition of behavior is. Because when they hear applied or just behavior therapy in general, most parents don't feel like their child is truly like has just behavioral issues, or maybe it's like, they have sensory issues, or maybe they just kind of act out in class a little bit, but it's like they just seem like, it could just be like a discipline issue. And so when I learned that behavior means it's their way of communicating, or there's a reason for the behavior because the behavior has a goal. And so being able to kind of break down that we're working a way to, if the child, for example, uses tantrums or uses like any kind of hitting, that's their way of communicating to you that whatever is happening is something they may not want or may not like, and they're trying to tell you, but due to having a certain type of intellectual disability, they're just unable to. So we come in and teach them how to communicate in a different way. In our BCBAs, write out what is in their functional behavior assessment, where they're basically, after they observe the child, and this is the whole speech I give to the parents, is they're going to observe the child to make your child's program, and I call it a curriculum through services, that your therapy is going to work one-on-one with your child.
And Julie, just based off of, what she's explaining when it comes down to parents understanding what is behavior, in your 17 years of experience, how would you define in layman's terms to someone who just wants to understand what type of services are we offering? How does understanding behavior help them in their journey?
Yeah, so behavior is essentially anything that somebody does. It could be physical actions, or it can be vocalizations, nonverbal communication. Behavior is everything that you do. And so there is, behaviors that maybe a child with autism have an excess, meaning that they're excessively tantruming or they're engaging in behaviors that typically developing children don't tend to engage in, which at times may inhibit them from, getting access to things that they want and they need. And then there's behavior in such a way that you're trying to increase behaviors that are functional. So things like social skills and communication and being able to build relationships. And so that is one of the first things that we talk to parents about, is understanding what behavior is and that there's certain behaviors that we want to increase and certain behaviors that we may want to decrease.
I like to look at our services as, helping the community, right? And I think that ABA, which is Applied Behavioral Analysis, is one of the core services that can actually help children, reach their goals, milestones, families too. Can you talk a little bit about the parent, training aspect or getting information to parents?
Yeah, so one of the things that I really appreciate about ABA is that it does incorporate parents and caregivers into the treatment. They're very much involved in the progression of, what we work on and the skills that we teach. And, especially at our organization, we work with the parents to understand, what is difficult in their daily lives, for their child, but also for them. Being a parent is really difficult, and, trying to manage, challenging behaviors can be very stressful. And so, our team really focuses on, collaborating with the parents and, like I said, getting to know what's difficult for them and targeting skills that will truly benefit their household. And, we basically hold their hand and help them through various situations that might come up when you're a parent of a child with autism.
Tyler, in your role, when you talk to the parents and they're coming to us and maybe they're overwhelmed, maybe they're, stressed, because I have kids kids who receive services, and I always thought to myself originally, we had a hard time taking our kids out, right? We didn't know what to do. And I remember when we first heard about ABA services, we thought, oh my gosh, these people are going to solve it. But we had unrealistic expectations. We thought that, okay, they're going to come here a couple of weeks, everything's going to be solved. And now, it's been, 9-10 years separated from the beginning. And I understand how much effort goes into treatment planning and getting access to services. What is a realistic expectation for a family coming into services from the time they talk to you to the time they actually have a team working with their child?
I would say on average, because since our core part of our services is compassionate care, we understand and that we choose to work in areas that are considered rural or urban areas. Most of these parents have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kids. So we understand that them being able to, we can get them into services, I'll say, like in a perfect world where the family has the time to do the initial part, because I would say after the initial part of getting your child's FBA completed and and sent into IHP, everything is mostly on us besides the parent training and the parent dropping the child off at the clinic. So we just need the parents to be involved like the most in one time in the very beginning. So we understand that due to their, having children in other sports or children in multiple schools, that it is difficult to have them sit down for, I believe, 2 sessions that could be a couple hours long. So after that, I would say on average, it takes about 3 weeks to start services. We've had families who were absolutely ready to go. And so we were able to complete their full report within, I believe, 8 days. So that's just the biggest hump, I would say. After that, our area managers are always on top of it. We always have a clinical team ready. And then our scheduling department calls the family the moment the report is completed to get the family's availability. And the moment we send that report over to the funder to be approved, the scheduling team is working on that availability to get the family a start date. So I would say from beginning to end, on average, I would say 3 to 4 weeks, but we can definitely do it lower. It's just we have to be able to have the family sit down for those quite long sessions. But that's just because we need to learn your child and we need to build your child's actual process for services. And that's just not something we can do in 5-10 minutes.
Yes, and I definitely would like to say that since you've been in your role, you've actually increased our wait times or decreased our wait times by 72%. Oh. That is outrageous, right?
I didn't know. Okay, I'll ask you later.
Well, in Central Reach's program, that
okay.
and that's me going off reports because from my role, typically I'm looking at like the big picture, right? And I'm thinking, I know we first met, we talked about wait times, and I was like, how do we put a measurement on how long people are waiting? And I know you have to remember, it was like 6 months, some people waiting 3 months. And that's kind of par with the industry. Like there's a lot of companies with wait lists. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of companies that their process to get you a clinical team assigned might take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. The fact that in our best case scenario, it was 7 days from the time someone spoke to you to the time someone actually received services. I mean, being assigned a clinical team, that was an urgent matter. We got someone in their house within 6-7 days. That is unrealistic. And our consistency since you've been in the role is a really big testament to like compassionate care, and actually you get into the role understanding like, oh my gosh, I want to help these people. So our team is clicking on all ends, I like to say, and to get access to care is like one of the biggest parts of our mission, right? We go into these communities and people have maybe never heard of what we're doing. We educate them, and we want to pride ourselves on them gaining access to care, whether it's through our company or another company. Because what people don't understand is if we get to the point to where we have a waiting list, our goal is not to turn a kid away. Our goal is to, be the support system for that family. And sometimes it might mean pointing them in a direction of a company that, is not ours. Because some service is better than no service at all, I like to think, and from your role, Julie, do you think that there is any benefit of us getting access so fast?
Absolutely. A lot of families tend to wait several months before they can even get a diagnostic evaluation completed. And so, as they've gone through that entire journey and they finally get to us, it's really important that we do our part to get them started in services right away, especially for younger children. They're like a sponge, right? And so you really want to get them into treatment as fast as you can because there's optimal learning when they're so young. And, I think that's something that our team does really well is I think we prioritize, like you said, access to care. We know that that's important, and we know that it can be kind of a frustrating journey for families in this whole process. And, it's nice too to have Tyler, who has hands-on experience being a behavior technician and can really share what the services are about. And, I think that is comforting to families as they start their journey with us.
Yeah, and fun fact, I didn't even know you spoke Spanish until
Oh yeah.
I was like, man, this is until you start speaking to a family, I was like, is this real?
It's valuable. Yeah.
Valuable, right? And from where I stand, I just always remember, how I was inspired in the very beginning. At some point, I had to drive my kids, an hour and a half down the hill, to Loma Linda. And then it would take me 2.5 hours to get back up the hill. Well, from Victorville to Loma Linda, which is not close, right? 3 times a week for them to get services. And then when we tried to get them ABA services, at the time, we could not get ABA services because they didn't have a autism diagnosis, right? And that was back in 2000, I think 11, 12. And now, we're able to get children services, even if they didn't have autism as a diagnosis. It can be any related disability. And I think that's very important because sometimes people will look at ABA services as just a service for autism. And, I don't believe it to be so. Can you elaborate on that?
ABA is really about behavior change, right? And developing, functional skills. And so I think that that can be beneficial across different areas. I think that with the research with autism, it is shown that ABA is the most effective treatment for autism. And that's actually why, health insurance companies are now funding these programs, because it's seen as the treatment, medical treatment. And although, autism, I think, is a focus in ABA, it can certainly help other disabilities or areas of, maybe struggle.
I think when I was getting my training through Kim for a behavior technician, my first, I guess, connection was, this is exactly, and I don't want to sound crazy, but this is exactly what it sounded like when I was getting training for my dog. And she's like, yeah, it's basically the same system. Like, it's just ABA for dogs. If you need to get, so my dog's behavior that she needed to get out of was her reactivity to other dogs. Just as she's a pit bull, loud, barking, scary. So we use ABA methods to make her be able to be comfortable. So I guess social skills with other dogs, and be able to, the moment she sees a dog, instead of barking, lunging, she learned to sit, look to me for, I guess, some type of reassurance, or just, and I'd give her a treat, and that reinforcement of giving her the treat was like, okay, cool. If I just relax when I see a dog, I can get a treat from this. And then she just does it on her own now. And it's been great. So like you said, it can be used for anything. It really can.
Yes. And in certain instances, there's athletes who use the same type of, science. There's, when I was in the fire department, if you really looked at the core of how we were trained, we were using the same type of systems. It's just the terminology and the way we measure is probably a little bit more intense when you're actually working in, the field of ABA. But I love, ABA because I just like the fact that you can quantify almost anything. And shaping behavior is a really, really good thing to be aware of. If you, especially with me, my kids, I look at it all the time, and indirectly we use ABA to raise our kids. And it's very helpful. Because before, it was off emotion or just based off of, what we learned generationally. And I think this is actually something that should be more implemented into even other practices, whether it's, licensed family marriage therapists or counseling. I think that big parts of ABA are very, very helpful to every different industry. And
I definitely agree with that. I think it's behavior change, right? And the core principle of ABA is that consequences are, desirable consequences will increase some type of behavior, and less desirable consequences will decrease some type of behavior. And so if you think about our own behavior, that happens to me all the time. There's certain consequences to things that I do that, are positive. And so that motivates me to continue to do that behavior. And so I think it's helpful just to understand behavior change in general, because I know I use it to reflect on my life and my behavior all the time.
Yes. And so people have heard me use a term that if someone comes, if a client comes to our company, we want to try to guarantee that we help your child become 10% better, right? And if that was to happen, what type of different services within ABA do you think we can offer to make that a possibility?
Well, I think it's always difficult to, know exactly how someone's going to respond to treatment. I think immediately it's important to assess what the priorities are for the client and the family, and to focus our time on those things, like what's going to make the most meaningful impact. So when you're talking about a 10%, increase or result in something, I think that it does take some time to understand, what's going to have the best impact on the client, because there's so many things that you could potentially work on in ABA. And so, you have to you have to observe the client, observe their home environment to assess, okay, how can I really help this client and this family? So I think that's step one. And then I think step two is parent involvement. As we talked about earlier, because in our services, we're only with them for a certain amount of time. And then they go home and they interact with their family and they're in their home environment. And so if parents understand what we're doing in our services or our treatment, they're able to carry on those same interventions across, home settings, community, school. And that really sets the client up for success and to make greater progress. And then I think the last thing is focusing our teaching on being able to generalize skills. We're teaching it in such a way where we're not just teaching it one way. We're teaching it, and generalization essentially means that if you're able to do one skill or engage in a behavior in one type of environment, you're able to do that across environments and with different people. And so, I think programming or understanding how to generalize skills from the teaching perspective is really important for greater, faster progress.
Yes, I definitely believe that. And Tyler, based on when you're working with the families or, speaking with families, have you ever had families that this was maybe not the correct service for them? And if that does happen, what does that look like?
I would say I've had parents who felt that way, where they're just like, I don't really think my child needs this. And so what I do is I just put them in contact with, since we already have, the approval to do the assessment, I just put them in contact with our assessors who are BCBAs. And I'm like, these are the professionals when it comes to this. So we've actually had that situation. We've had actual multiple assessments that end up just being, hey, this kid does not need services. So we would just turn it into the funder saying, we're going to go ahead and redirect the child back to funder. We do not believe this child needs services, and send them on their merry way. So I can't say I make that decision or know when that decision is time, but I put it in the hands of our clinicians to go ahead and make that decision.
And the kids that typically do need the service, I know it's a wide range of clients that we do work with. Can you kind of give us an idea of diagnosis that a child might have, age that we typically would serve, and proximity, meaning, what areas are we serving, plus what type of medical insurances typically do we work with?
Okay, so the most common diagnosis is obviously going to be autism. Right below that, it would be ADHD. And I would say I do know we have I think a couple children with Down syndrome, and then a lot of children who kind of have these mixed, it's just, I don't remember the code, but it just says mild intellectual disability. So there is no firm diagnosis, but their primary care physician or whoever they went to for their assessment noticed that there is something there. They just don't want to maybe qualify it as ABA or anything else. And then the typical ages, we do offer services from up until the age of 18. I'd say our core would be most likely kids that are 7 to 12. Which is our after school kids. And then we in our morning times, we get a lot of our kids who are probably under the age of 4. And then I'd say right in the middle would be, kids who are 5 to 6. We do have teenagers who come into services. I would say just a small handful. I think most parents, when their child is at that age, typically takes them to more peer-based services, just because I think a lot of them just want to have their child just be more independent on their own. So just put them in the position to do that. The areas that we work out of, so we have 3 clinics: San Bernardino in the city of San Bernardino, Barstow, and Apple Valley. I would say pretty confidently that we're pretty much in the heart of all 3 of those cities. So we're pretty much right in the middle. If you need to find us, we're never too far if you live in San Bernardino or surrounding cities. And then right now, our main funder is IEHP, the Inland Empire Health Plan. We offer services through Kaiser. We have Cigna/Evernorth, which is a combination insurance plan. I I believe we also have Aetna, HealthNet, and finally, I think we are working on, we also have Blue Cross, and we are getting into Blue Shield. And then to go back to locations, our next location that we are getting referrals from, and we're trying to go ahead and start making that way, is down in the Riverside area. Because we do know a lot of families in Riverside are not able to get services. So that is our next step. And I think that's every question.
And then in addition, we have Cover California, which is a huge initiative that we're trying to ensure that we're not leaving anybody unserved, because IEHP in an Empire Health Plan has 90% of the market in an Empire. That is, I don't think you find any health plan that's covering, a whole area to that percentage, but you do have Cover California, who's in partnership with in an Empire Health Plan. And our goal right now is to make sure that if someone does have Cover California, that they're able to reach us by just going to, how would they reach us, Tyler? Because you're the main.
I'm always available during normal business hours. And if not, then you would just get called. Your call would go to our scheduling department, who is also pretty well trained to able to at least get you get your foot in the door. And then I would just call you back the next morning. It would be our main line, which is 442-327-9172. Extension 3 takes you straight to the intake department. And you do not have to have a diagnosis. You do not need to have a referral for us. If you just have a question, you can call us. There is no problem with that. And then if not, we also have 360humanservices.com/enroll, which has a full breakdown of what our services are. And if you already have a referral, you can go ahead and skip the process of the phone call and just go ahead and sign the client service agreement. Once I see that's in, you'll get a call from me to let you know that I received it, and our assessor would be reaching out to you. And if not, you can always email me at info@360humanservices.com. So I'm available.
Thank you very much. And, Julie, and let's just switch hats for a little while. If someone was looking to make a difference in their community and they were thinking about working with a child in this industry, what do you suggest they do to make that a reality?
Yeah, I think the first step really is to potentially pursue a position as a behavior technician. That's kind of the starting point in this field. And the nice thing about, a career in ABA is you don't necessarily have to have prior experience. We provide that to you from the very beginning. So we'll train you on what ABA is and what autism is and how to effectively work with clients. And, a big focus too of our clinical team is mentorship and developing our team. Not just because it results in better quality service, but because we actually want to see our staff succeed in their career and their development. And, even if they're not in ABA long term, I know myself, I grew personally significantly when I started in the field of ABA. I was a completely different person after a year of working in ABA. And our clinical team gets excited that we get to help others experience that type of same, professional and maybe even personal growth journey.
And is there a certification typically attached to the entry-level role that someone can obtain? And what do they need prior to obtain that certificate?
Yeah, so probably the most recognized certification as a behavior technician is your RBT, which is a registered behavior technician. And to get that credential, it's a series of, trainings and additional learnings in ABA and behavior change. And upon going through that additional training, there's a exam that they have to take and pass. And then there's also an application part to the exam where they work with a client and they're evaluated by a board certified, behavior analyst. And, after they get that certification, it is something that's recognized heavily in the field, and respected, and just nice to have that experience. Yeah.
So, Tyler, you spoke earlier about being in your ABA program. Can you elaborate? So, someone has came into the field, they've, obtained a role as a as a behavioral technician. Now they've went and even saw further knowledge, became certified, received their RBT. Now they're looking to move up higher in the field. So they enroll into a ABA program. Can you kind of talk about what an ABA program is and what does it lead to?
The ABA program is a master's program, so you do have to have your bachelor's first. There are quite a few online programs for you to take. You apply, they'll go ahead. The advisors will reach out to you, kind of make sure that you are sure that this is the program you need. And if not, maybe they'll talk to you about other programs. But if you are for sure, you do want to go to get your master's in ABA. It is an online, most of them are online courses, self-paced. Mine is about 10 classes. So I will be done July of 2027. I'm in my second class right now. They have what's called these, for my class, it's the BDS modules, which is highly recommended through most people who've already taken their BCBA exam, which is available for you while you're in school and once you're out of school to keep practicing to take the exam, because once you're out of school, it's up to you to take the exam on your own and pass on your own.
That's what I did. I did the BDS module.
Yeah, they have those. And then there's the Cooper textbook, which is pretty popular. You go ahead and use those too. If not, there are quite a few, I would say quite a few outside sources. I know there's one called Pass the Big ABA Exam. I think that's the name of it or something. So I would say it is a hefty exam, and it has a pretty interesting pass rate, which is not as high as you would think. So, which not to scare you to not take it that far, but at least you know that they are making sure that this is something you are mastering, not something you're getting through. So I think, especially for our parents, when you're talking about your child's BCBA, just know that your child's BCBA went through a 4-hour vigorous exam that has, I think, a 60% pass rate. So I promise you, your BCA knows what they're talking about, and they are there to do their job. That's their goal. So I would say that's all it takes to become a BCA.
Yeah, indeed. Sorry, go ahead, Julie.
Oh, no, I was just going to mention, too, that, there is your BCABA, which is a certification for somebody that has their bachelor's. So it's a little bit like a stepping stone to getting your BCBA, but that's a certification that's also recognized. And two, when it comes to getting your BCBA, your master's doesn't necessarily have to be in applied behavior analysis. It can be in also a related field like psychology or, educational psychology, clinical services. And so, you can get your master's in another area, but then take specific coursework to get your BCBA exam.
As we sit now, there's play therapy. There's different types of therapy, and some people might think that with those therapies are the same thing that we are providing, and it is not the same, right? The scientific side of things makes it so, because this is truly evidence-based. Mm-hmm. You can't tell me, that, send me reports saying, oh, I feel like, he's improved. You have to prove it. And the medical insurance also makes sure you prove it. So, I think when it comes to making it stricter, criteria for someone to do this, I think it's for the best interest of the consumers at the end of the day. And if someone wants to do this and they want to become a BCBA, I think that it is a really good thing that you're aware that you're coming into a team, right? You have a behavioral technician. If you have 13 units towards your master's, you can, become a supervisor. We prefer masters, but someone that's going through their ABA program, once they reach 13 units, it helps them because they can become what most industries will call an associate level clinician. So you're under the supervision of a BCBA and you're getting your hours signed off in real time with real clients. And this team approach is what drives me to this industry, on top of being able to, prove that we are actually making progress in children. And I like to say at the end of this, whenever I retire or, I'm not in the industry anymore, that I can tell you how many children and what percentage we we improved. That would be awesome.
I think I would just want parents of children with autism to know that ABA is an effective treatment, for their child potentially. And with our organization, we do everything that we can to, like I said earlier, hold their hand through the process and to work on things that we know are going to be impactful in daily life and make their child's life better and hopefully their life better as well.
I was just thinking as you were talking, our end goal, which is just graduation, especially I think this past month we've had past 2 months, I think we just had the most graduations we've had in a while, I believe. And to know for parents to also know is that our goal is not to always be here. Our goal is to get your child to graduate out of services. So our goal is to not want to see you in a good way, just to get you out of there. Because if your child has graduated services, that means I think 80% of for every goal they're hitting, I think 80%.
80%.
Yeah. So yeah. So
Is it 80% success in one sitting? Is it across different, areas? How do you measure that? How do you come up with the 80%?
It's across time, across therapy sessions. And as I mentioned earlier, we work on generalization. So, we make sure that all the skills that they learned with, in one setting, they're able to do in different settings in 80% of those opportunities.
And just a follow-up question, who's coming up with those goals and things that the children want to learn? Is it us or is it the family? Combination.
It's a collaboration. The BCBA who creates the treatment plan will, based off the assessment, create goals for various skills, to teach various skills and also to reduce maybe challenging behaviors. But it's certainly in collaboration with the parents because we don't see the child, in every setting. And so we really value their input about what they think is important for their child to learn and what's going to be meaningful for their child.
And, for me, to close this out, I definitely want to say that if any parent is looking to obtain services or thinking about their child's development and they're looking for a partner in their kid's journey, I think that, and I know that 360 Human Services is probably one of the leaders in getting your kid access to services. And we are actually a support system. We're part of your team. And if you ever want to receive these type of services, like Tyler talked to before, you can just go on 360humanservices.com. I don't remember their phone number because she has a photographic memory, but 360humanservices.com. What's the next part?
/enroll.
/enroll. Yeah. And you can click on the form and it will take you directly to someone. And our goal is to reach back out to you within a day, right? And if you are overwhelmed, stressed out, or just want to get further information, we're here to give you information. And we don't always have to be the person that you partner with because our goal as an organization is to ensure that kids get access to services as fast as possible. Also, if someone's looking to, work in this field and are willing to do the work, definitely reach out to us because there's a lot of need and there's a lot of people who are compassionate and they want to make a change. And what we do is we're going to take you from where you're at today and help you get to sit in one of these seats if possible, if you're willing to do the work. And, outside of that, I want to thank everybody for listening and thank you, everyone.